The security camera captured Alcarin Martinez stomping across my pristine lawn at 6 a.m., her manicured finger jabbing at my chest like a weapon. "Your pool is community property now," she hissed, waving that dreaded HOA notice. What she didn't know was that I'd already made my choice. By sunset, 15,000 gallons would be gone. Her precious party would be ruined, and 3 squad cars would be screaming down Maple Street. But the real shock, the secret I discovered in her own backyard that would flip this entire neighborhood war on its head. The first sign of trouble came with the certified letter. David Chen stood in his driveway, still in his bathrobe, squinting at the official HOA letterhead as his coffee grew cold in his hand. The morning sun cast long shadows across Willowbrook Estates, the kind of picture-perfect suburban development where every lawn was measured with rulers and every mailbox painted the approved shade of forest green. "Mandatory pool access compliance notice," he read aloud, his voice echoing off the pristine garage doors lining the street. What the hell? The letter was signed by Karen Martinez, HOA president, in her characteristic purple ink, this same purple she used to cite neighbors for leaving their trash cans out 30 minutes past pickup time. David had been dodging Karen's power trips for 3 years, ever since he'd moved to Willowbrook after his divorce. His modest 2-story house sat on the corner lot, which meant his backyard pool was technically visible from the street, a fact that had apparently caught Karen's attention. Due to recent community feedback regarding equitable access to recreational facilities, the letter continued, "All pools visible from public areas must be made available for community use during designated hours. Failure to comply will result in daily fines of $500, beginning Monday, June 24th. Monday. That was today. David crumpled the letter and was about to head inside when he heard the distinct sound of heels clicking against concrete. He turned to see Karen Martinez marching up his driveway like she owned it, her platinum blonde hair pulled into a severe bun, her lips pursed in their permanent state of disapproval. "Mr. Chen," she called out, her voice carrying that fake sweetness. "That fooled exactly no one. I trust you received our notice." "Your notice," David corrected, not bothering to hide his irritation. "This isn't community property, Karen. I bought this house. I pay the mortgage, I maintain the pool." Karen stopped 3 feet away, close enough that he could smell her aggressive floral perfume. She was wearing her standard uniform white capri pants, a pink polo shirt with the HOA logo embroidered on the chest, and enough jewelry to stock a department store. "Actually," she said, pulling out her phone and scrolling through what appeared to be legal documents. "According to Section 15.7 of the Community Bylaws, any recreational facility that enhances property values for the surrounding area falls under shared community benefits. Your pool increases everyone's home values. Therefore, everyone should have access. That's not how property law works. That's how community law works." Her smile sharpened. "Besides, my daughter Madison is having her graduation party this Saturday, 50 guests. We'll need the space." David stared at her. "Your daughter, your party, my pool, our pool," Karen corrected. "Don't worry, we'll provide our own food and drinks, though you might want to clean it first. I noticed some leaves in the deep end." The audacity hit him like a physical blow. David had spent his Saturday mornings for 3 years skimming those leaves, checking chemical levels, replacing filters. He'd paid for the solar heating system, the automatic cleaner, the professional winter. The pool had been his sanctuary after the divorce, the one place where he could float on his back and pretend the world made sense. "No," he said simply. Karen's eyebrows shot up. "Excuse me, no, you can't use my pool. End of discussion." "Mr. Chen," Karen's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper, "I don't think you understand. The HOA board voted on this. It's not a request." "What board? You mean the 3 people who show up to your monthly meetings in your living room? We have 7 active members. You have 3 neighbors who are too scared to tell you no. And for phantom votes from people who moved away years ago," David stepped closer, matching her intimidation tactics. "I've done my research. Karen, your little power trip doesn't hold legal water." Karen's composure cracked for just a moment, and David caught a glimpse of genuine fury beneath the suburban mom facade. Then she smoothed her expression and smiled again. "Well," she said, "I suppose we'll see about that. The fine structure begins today. $500 per day until you comply. I'd hate for this to get expensive." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and David, you might want to check your community standing. Non-compliance affects more than just your wallet." With that cryptic threat, she clicked back down the driveway, leaving David standing there with his cold coffee and a growing sense of dread. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of phone calls. David contacted his lawyer, who confirmed what he'd suspected. Karen's interpretation of the HOA bylaws was creative at best, fraudulent at worst. But legal battles took time, and Karen was already posting notices around the neighborhood about exciting new community pool access. By noon, David's doorbell was ringing every 20 minutes. First came the Jenkins family from 2 houses down, their 3 kids in tow, with pool floats and sunscreen. Then the Patels, followed by the Thompsons, then people he didn't even recognize. Sorry, he told each group, the pool's not available. The disappointment in the children's faces made him feel like a monster, but he held firm. This wasn't about being neighborly, this was about Karen Martinez thinking she could steamroll anyone who stood in her way. The breaking point came at 4 p.m. David was in his kitchen when he heard splashing sounds from his backyard. He rushed to the window and saw them at least 15 people in his pool. Kids cannonballing off the diving board. Teenagers playing volleyball with his pool net. Adults lounging on his pool furniture while drinking from his outdoor refrigerator. He ran outside, his vision blurring with rage. "Get out," he shouted. "All of you, get out of my pool right now." The splashing stopped. Everyone turned to stare at him like he'd grown a second head. "But Mrs. Martinez said," began one of the mothers. "I don't care what Mrs. Martinez said, this is private property. You're trespassing. The HOA notice said the HOA notice is garbage. Get out before I call the police." Slowly, reluctantly, the families began gathering their things. David stood there, shaking as they filed past him, shooting him dirty looks and muttering about community spirit and selfish neighbors. The last to leave was a teenage girl he recognized as Madison Martinez Karen's daughter. She was tall and athletic, with her mother's blonde hair, but thankfully none of her attitude. "Mr. Chen," she said quietly, "I'm really sorry about this. I told my mom we could just rent a community center or something, but she said, it's not your fault, Madison." She nodded and started to leave, then turned back. "For what it's worth, I think what she's doing is wrong. The pool thing, but also, other stuff." "Other stuff?" Madison glanced around nervously. "Just ... be careful, okay? My mom doesn't like losing." Before David could ask what she meant, the girl hurried away, leaving him alone in his violated backyard. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the muddy footprints on his pool deck, the empty beer bottles floating in his skimmer basket, the chocolate handprints on his white patio furniture. Then he went inside and made a decision that would change everything. The Willowbrook Pool and Spa Company answered on the second ring. "Hi," David said, surprised by how calm his voice sounded. "I need an emergency pool drainage. Tonight, all of it." "Sir, that's 15,000 gallons of water. Are you sure? The cost to refill, I'm sure. How quickly can you get here? We could have a crew there by 6. But may I ask why the emergency?" David looked out his kitchen window at the chaos of his backyard, then at the growing crowd of neighbors gathering on the street, no doubt comparing notes about their community pool access. "Let's just say I'm making a statement." The technician arrived at 6:15 p.m. sharp, just as the dinner crowd was finishing their meals and several families were preparing for evening swims. David watched from his living room window as the massive drainage truck backed into his driveway, its industrial hoses snaking toward his backyard like mechanical serpents. The process would take 4 hours. By the time Karen Martinez discovered what he'd done, there would be nothing left but an empty concrete crater and the echo of his defiance. David poured himself a scotch and settled in to watch the show. Tomorrow, he suspected, the real war would begin. But tonight, he was going to enjoy the sound of 15,000 gallons of Karen Martinez's dreams swirling down the drain. The screaming started at 6:47 a.m. David bolted upright in bed, instantly alert despite having fallen asleep just 3 hours earlier. He'd stayed up watching the drainage operation, mesmerized by the steady drop of water levels until his pool resembled a concrete tomb in the moonlight. Now Karen Martinez's voice was cutting through the morning air like a chainsaw through silk. "What have you done? What the hell have you done?" David threw on a robe and rushed to his bedroom window. Karen stood at the edge of his empty pool, her perfectly styled hair wild, her white robe billowing around her like the wings of an avenging angel. She was pacing the pool deck, her hands gesturing frantically at the bone-dry deep end. Behind her stood a small army of contractors' caterers wheeling serving tables, a DJ testing sound equipment, party rental employees with boxes of decorations. They all looked confused and increasingly irritated as Karen's voice rose to glass-shattering decibels. "The party's in 6 hours," she shrieked. 6 hours. "Madison's friends are coming from 3 different colleges. I've spent $8,000. David opened his window. "Maybe you should have asked permission first." Karen's head snapped up. When she spotted him in the window, her face transformed into something primal and terrifying. "You psychopath. You absolute sociopath. Do you have any idea what you've done? I've protected my property. This is sabotage. This is terrorism." The contractors were starting to pack up their equipment. The caterer, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, approached Karen with obvious reluctance. "Ma'am, we can't set up a pool party without a pool. We'll need to reschedule or find an alternative venue." "There is no alternative venue." Karen spun around, her robe catching the morning breeze. "Every decent place in town is booked months in advance. My daughter's graduation party is ruined. I'm sorry, but we'll have to charge the full cancellation fee since it's less than 24 hours. Send the bill to him." Karen pointed at David's window. "He's paying for all of this. David closed the window and headed downstairs to make coffee. Through his kitchen window, he watched the parade of vendors leaving his driveway, their trucks and vans creating a traffic jam on Maple Street. Neighbors had gathered on their front lawns, drawn by the commotion. Most looked confused, but a few of the ones who'd been in his pool yesterday looked distinctly hostile. His doorbell rang at 7:15 a.m. David opened it to find Madison Martinez standing on his porch, still in pajamas, her eyes red and swollen. Unlike her mother's theatrical fury, the girl's pain was quiet and genuine. "Please," she said simply, "can you fill it back up? Just for today." David's chest tightened. Madison had always been polite, had never participated in her mother's neighborhood campaigns. She'd even warned him yesterday about her mother's vindictive nature. "Madison, I'm sorry. I really am. But this isn't about you. It is about me." The tears spilled down her cheeks. "It's my party, my friends. Some of them are driving 8 hours to be here. I haven't seen them since Christmas. Your mother should have thought about that before she tried to steal my pool. She's crazy. Okay, I know she's crazy, but she's still my mom, and this party. It's the only thing she's ever planned that wasn't about controlling other people." She actually seemed happy for once. David felt his resolve wavering. Then he remembered the beer bottles in his skimmer, the muddy footprints, the violation of his privacy. "I'm sorry," he said again. "I can't." Madison nodded and wiped her eyes. "I understand. I just, I had to ask." She turned to leave, then paused. "Mr. Chen, be careful today. Mom called her lawyer at 6 this morning, and her brother, Uncle Rick, he's a cop in the city. Mom always calls him when she wants to scare people." Before David could respond, Madison hurried back across the street, leaving him with a knot of anxiety in his stomach. The first squad car arrived at 10:30 a.m. David was in his home office, trying to work, when he heard the slam of car doors. He looked out to see 2 uniformed officers walking up his driveway, their faces grim and professional. Karen Martinez stood on the sidewalk, pointing at his house and speaking rapidly. The doorbell's chime felt like a funeral bell. Mr. Chen, the older officer, was tall and broad-shouldered with graying temples and tired eyes. "I'm Officer Williams. This is Officer Novak. We've received a complaint about property destruction and potential safety hazards." "What kind of safety hazards?" "Ma'am says you've created a dangerous condition by draining your pool without proper barriers or warning signs." David looked past the officers to where Karen stood, her arms crossed, her expression triumphant. "It's my pool, on my property. Behind my fence, that may be, sir, but we need to document the situation. Mind if we take a look?" David led them through his house to the backyard. The empty pool did look somewhat ominous in the morning light. A 12-foot deep concrete pit with metal ladder rungs descending into darkness. Officer Novak, younger and clearly uncomfortable with the situation, circled the pool's perimeter. "When did you drain it?" "Last night, had it professionally done." "Why?" David considered his options. The truth sounded petty. A lie would only make things worse. "The HOA president has been trying to force me to allow community access to my pool. I declined." This was my response. Officer Williams wrote something in his notepad. "Do you have any documentation of these demands?" The letters inside. David retrieved Karen's notice and handed it over. Williams read it carefully, his eyebrows rising with each paragraph. "This doesn't look official," he said finally, "because it's not." Karen Martinez wrote it herself and slapped an HOA letterhead on it. Williams handed the letter back. "Sir, I'm going to be honest with you. This is a civil matter, not a criminal one. You have every right to drain your own pool." Relief flooded through David's chest. "However," Williams continued, "the lady out front is very upset. She's threatening to file complaints with the city about property maintenance, noise violations, anything she can think of. My advice, try to work something out." I tried. She demanded access to my pool for her daughter's party. When I said no, she declared it community property. Officer Novak shook his head. "Some people," Williams shot his partner a warning look. "Like I said, try to work it out. But you're not breaking any laws by maintaining your own property however you see fit." The officers left, but Karen wasn't finished. David watched from his kitchen window as she spoke animatedly with Williams for another 10 minutes, her gestures becoming increasingly frantic. When the patrol car finally pulled away, she marched straight back to David's front door. This time, she didn't bother with the doorbell. She pounded on the door with her fist, the sound echoing through the house. Like gunshots. "Open up, David. I know you're in there." David opened the door but kept the security chain latched. Through the 3-inch gap, Karen's face looked distorted and dangerous. "The police say you haven't broken any laws," she hissed. "Fine, but I promise you, by the end of today, you'll wish you'd never moved to this neighborhood." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." "You want to play games? Let's play games." She spun away from the door, but instead of leaving, she walked to the center of his front lawn and pulled out her phone. David could hear her voice clearly through the window. "Hi, This is Karen Martinez, president of the Willowbrook Estates, HOA. I need to report a code violation at 1247 Maple Street. Unmaintained swimming pool creating a potential safety hazard. Yes, I'll hold. Over the next hour, David's doorbell rang 6 times. Code enforcement officers, city inspectors, even a representative from the water department, all responding to complaints filed by Karen Martinez. Each official examined his property, found no violations, and left with barely concealed annoyance at having their time wasted, but Karen was just getting started. At 2 p.m., a moving truck pulled up to David's house. David watched in amazement as 2 burly men climbed out and approached his door. David Chen, we're here for the pool furniture pickup. I didn't order any pickup. The driver consulted his clipboard. Lady across the street said you were donating patio furniture to charity. Already paid for the service. The lady across the street doesn't own my furniture. David looked across the street to see Karen standing in her driveway, talking on her phone, occasionally glancing over with a satisfied smirk. The moving men left, but 20 minutes later, a lawn service arrived to remove the dead landscaping around the pool area. After that came a fence company to repair the safety hazard in the backyard, followed by a pest control service reporting dangerous insect infestations near standing water. Each time, David had to explain that he hadn't ordered the service, that someone was harassing him, that no, he wasn't going to pay the cancellation fees. By 4 p.m., Maple Street looked like a trade show. Service trucks lined both sides of the road, their drivers comparing notes and getting increasingly angry about the wasted trips. Neighbors had gathered in small groups, some filming the chaos with their phones, others shouting questions that no one could answer over the noise. David stood in his living room, watching his quiet suburban street transform into a circus, and realized that Karen Martinez had successfully turned his act of defiance into a neighborhood crisis. She'd weaponized the very community she claimed to protect, turning every resident into either an all. David stood in his backyard, watching 3 industrial pumpers snake their hoses toward his empty pool, their engines rumbling like mechanical thunder. The sound drew every neighbor within a 6-block radius. His fence line was packed with faces, pressed against the slats, phones recording, voices buzzing with speculation. Karen Martinez stood in her own backyard, her mouth hanging open in stunned disbelief. Start pumping, David told the crew chief. Fast as you can. The first blast of water hit the concrete bottom with a sound like a waterfall. David had paid triple rate for emergency service, but seeing Madison's tear-streaked face had made the decision easy. He could fight Karen's tyranny without destroying an 18-year-old's graduation celebration. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Thank you, I'll pay you back somehow. Madison. David typed back, just have a good party. But even as the pool began to fill, David knew this wasn't over. Karen Martinez didn't strike him as the type to accept gracious defeat. She'd been humiliated in front of the entire neighborhood, her authority challenged, her tactics exposed. Women like Karen didn't forgive. They escalated. The pool was half full when the first guests started arriving for Madison's party. David watched from his kitchen window as cars pulled into the Martinez driveway, young adults with luggage in college sweatshirts, their laughter carrying across the street. They looked confused by the chaos, the lingering service trucks. The crowd of neighbors still gathered to watch the spectacle. Madison emerged from her house wearing a yellow sundress, her earlier tears replaced by a smile that transformed her entire face. She hugged each friend, pointing excitedly toward David's backyard where the pool was steadily rising. Karen, however, was nowhere to be seen. By 7 p.m., the pool was full and the party was in full swing. Music drifted across the street, mixed with splashing and laughter. David found himself smiling as he grilled dinner on his back patio, oddly comforted by the sounds of young people having fun in his pool. Then his doorbell rang. David opened the door to find a man he didn't recognize. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing an expensive suit despite the summer heat. His hair was silver gray, his jaw square, his eyes the same pale blue as Karen's. Mr. Chen, I'm Richard Martinez, Karen's brother. We need to talk. David had been expecting this since Madison's warning that morning. About what? About the little stunt you pulled last night. The harassment of my sister, the destruction of private property. I didn't destroy anything. I drained my own pool. Richard Martinez stepped closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. You sabotaged a private event. Caused $8,000 in damages. Humiliated a respected member of this community. Your sister tried to steal my pool. I said, no. End of story. My sister is the president of your HOA. She was trying to implement community improvements. David studied the man's face. Richard Martinez had the same entitled arrogance as Karen, but wrapped in expensive clothing and legal jargon. This wasn't a concern, brother. This was a threat. Are you here as Karen's brother or as a police officer? Richard's expression flickered with surprise. Madison told you. She warned me you might try to intimidate me. I'm not intimidating anyone. I'm explaining legal realities. Richard straightened his tie. Filing false police reports is a misdemeanor. Harassment is a misdemeanor. Creating public disturbances is a misdemeanor. Stack enough misdemeanors together, and they become a pattern of behavior that prosecutors take very seriously. Are you threatening to file false charges against me? I'm explaining consequences. Richard smiled coldly. My sister has documented every interaction with you, every code violation complaint, every service call, every instance where you've disrupted this community's peace. That's a compelling case for ongoing harassment. David felt ice forming in his stomach. Richard Martinez wasn't just Karen's brother, he was her nuclear option. A cop with connections, willing to abuse his authority to win a neighborhood dispute. What do you want? An apology. In writing. Post it to the community Facebook page. Full acknowledgement that your behavior was inappropriate and disruptive. And if I refuse, Richard's smile widened. Then we'll see how much appetite you have for legal battles. The threat hung in the air between them like toxic smoke. David understood now why Karen had been so confident, so dismissive of his resistance. She had a brother in law enforcement willing to weaponize the system against anyone who challenged her authority, but as David considered his options, something unexpected happened. Madison Martinez appeared beside her uncle, her face pale but determined. Uncle Rick, stop. Richard turned, his expression softening. Madison, honey, go back to your party. This is adult business. This is my business. It's my party, my graduation, and Mr. Chen is the reason it's happening at all. What are you talking about? Madison glanced at David, then back at her uncle. Mom told you he drained the pool to sabotage my party, right? That he's some kind of psychopath who hates teenagers. That's what she said. She lied. Madison's voice was steady, but David could see her hands trembling. Mr. Chen drained the pool because Mom tried to force him to let strangers use it. She made up some fake HOA rule about community property. When he said no, she told half the neighborhood they could swim here anyway. Richard's confident expression began to crack. Mom turned his backyard into a public pool without his permission. Madison continued. People were drinking his beer, using his furniture, letting their kids trash his property. So he drained it. And then this morning, when I asked him to fill it back up for my party, he said yes. He spent his own money to make sure my friends could come. Madison, you don't understand the full situation. I understand that Mom's been terrorizing this neighborhood for years, and everyone's too scared to stand up to her because she threatens to call you. Madison's voice was rising now, carrying across the street where the party had gone quiet. I understand that she's turned being HOA president into a personal dictatorship, and I understand that you help her do it. Richard Martinez looked around, and seemed to notice for the first time that they had an audience. Neighbors had emerged from their houses, drawn by the raised voices. Madison's college friends were gathered at the fence line, their expressions shifting from confusion to anger as they processed what they were hearing. Madison, lower your voice. No. Madison stepped forward, her fear transforming into righteous fury. I'm 18 years old. I'm graduating magna cum laude. I got into Stanford. I'm not a little girl you can intimidate anymore. She turned to address the growing crowd. For anyone who doesn't know, this is my Uncle Rick. He's a police officer in the city, and for the past 6 years, my mom has been using his badge to threaten anyone who disagrees with her HOA decisions. She calls him, he shows up in his uniform, and suddenly, everyone backs down. Madison, that's enough. The Johnson's fence violation that mysteriously got escalated to the city. Uncle Rick. The Patel's noise complaints that brought 3 SQUAD cars for a birthday party. Uncle Rick. The Hendersons' mysterious drug activity investigation that got their teenage son arrested for possession of Advil. Uncle Rick. The crowd was growing larger, and David could see phones appearing, recording the confrontation. Richard Martinez looked increasingly desperate. You're making serious accusations. I'm telling the truth. Madison's voice cracked with emotion. And I'm done pretending Mom's crusade for community standards is anything other than bullying with a badge. That's when Karen Martinez finally appeared. She came running across the street, her heels clicking frantically on the asphalt, her face a mask of panic and rage. Madison, get inside, right now. No, Mom, you don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. Madison turned to face her mother, and David could see years of suppressed frustration pouring out of her. I know you've been using this neighborhood as your personal kingdom. I know you've been destroying people's lives over fence heights and mailbox colors. And I know you tried to steal Mr. Chen's pool because you thought you could get away with it. Karen looked around at the assembled crowd, her political instincts finally kicking in. Everyone, please, this is a private family matter. No, it's not, called out a voice from the crowd. David turned to see Mrs. Patel stepping forward, her usually quiet demeanor replaced by steely determination. This is about all of us, about 3 years of harassment and intimidation. The fence violation that cost us $2,000, added Mr. Johnson. The noise complaints that got our son's college application flagged, said Mrs. Henderson. One by one, neighbors began stepping forward. sharing stories of Karen's abuse of power, of Richard's intimidation tactics, of years of living in fear of the HOA president's retaliation. Karen Martinez found herself surrounded by the very community she'd claimed to protect, their faces no longer showing the deference and fear she'd grown accustomed to. "This is ridiculous," she said, but her voice lacked its usual authority. "I've been protecting property values, maintaining community standards. You've been terrorizing innocent people," Madison said quietly, "and I'm ashamed that I stayed quiet for so long." Richard Martinez grabbed his sister's arm. "Karen, we need to leave now." But it was too late. The crowd had grown to include Mo,